I've gate crashed the start of this event just to speak for a couple of minutes. And firstly, just want to say thanks to everyone for joining us. We've had a really great sign up to this evening, and I think a really fascinating series of topics that are going to be talked about over the next while. As you probably appreciate, this event's actually been months in the planning, and I want to thank everyone who's brought it to fruition. And I also want to emphasize that involvement's been part of how we work for a long time. And really, again, thank Lorna for leading the drive to widen and deepen how we use it as a key tool in making sure what the Cystic Fibrosis Trust is relevant. It does is truly relevant to the people that we're looking to support and serve. I think this evening we'll showcase some really great examples and I hope inspire some of those of you who haven't been involved to date to be involved. I also want to say that for me, involvement is, and this is going to sound a bit like X Factor, and I apologise, but involvement is more like a journey than a destination, and one that we need to constantly focus our attention on. I think we've been getting a lot of things right, and again, Lorna, our involvement group, and all those who've made that happen should be congratulated. But we also do get things wrong, as we did a couple of weeks ago when we were communicating on the topic of life expectancy. I'm really sorry about that, but to me that is also a key opportunity to emphasize again how important it is that we use involvement across the full range of what we do and how we communicate, so that we can address all issues and all aspects of life with cystic fibrosis, including the sensitive and difficult topics, in the right way. So thanks again for joining. I'm not going to take any more of Lorna and the team's time, but really just wanted to say again, thank you. I hope those who aren't involved will be inspired to do more and to help us to continue to grow our impact across the whole cystic fibrosis community. So thank you and enjoy the evening.
Thanks, David. So I just want to welcome everybody to this evening. This is the last in this current series of the CF Live events that were scheduled since last July. And it's really going to be, I think, a whistle-stop showcase of the involvement work stream. So we'll try and get through as much as we can in the time that we've got. We're aware of taking up time of everybody's evening, but I hope that you'll find it a really positive and engaging event. So to introduce myself, I'm Lorna Allen. I'm the Involvement Manager at the Trust. I've been here for 4.5 years. My role's really developed from working primarily on the clinical trials accelerator platform and the involvement lead on that. And now over the last 10, 11 months, broadening that involvement work stream across the Trust. I'm also a CF mum. My daughter's 23, she turned 23 the week before last, and yeah, doing very well. So my role at the Trust really is to ensure that people living with CF, their families, and all those that support them, partners, siblings, grandparents, have the opportunity to take part in a variety of involvement activities. That's in our work at the Trust and beyond. So that might be joining focus group discussions, reviewing research documentation, defining materials and publications that we develop at the Trust, or maybe even joining a project committee. Our involvement groups consist of adults living with CF and young people living with CF, parents of young children, parents of adults, grandparents, partners, siblings, as I say. So in addition to the involvement activities, identifying and shaping the work of the Trust, we also act really as a conduit and seek and facilitate conversation with external research teams, pharmaceutical companies, and other organisations such as the National Institute of Health Research and the Genetics Alliance, just as examples. So as I say, this is really a whistle-stop intro, massive world of involvement. So I say hope we can get through as much as we can this evening. So what is involvement? We keep talking about it. It's really ensuring that the people that the trust exists to represent have the opportunities to inform the direction and content of our work, as well as I say, influencing external contacts and organisations we deal with. So literally shaping the future of CF, how it's treated, how we live with it, really. So for the ease of describing, there's almost two routes to involvement. There's internal, as I say, it's the work of the trust, how you inform the work of the trust, our information resources library, what information do you need and in what format, ensuring that the materials have the right focus and use the right language. We've got our quality improvement programme, which Tracy will talk about later, where we look at addressing the areas of CF healthcare that matter to people utilising those services. Our research programme, making sure it funds the right projects that mean something to the community, and address areas of concerns for people in their health regime, that we drive policy decisions accurately representing the community voice. And for instance, in our recent strategy focus groups where we're developing the new 3-year strategy for the trust, making sure that that's really driven by community insight, and that is gathered from priority setting exercises that have been conducted over the years. I'm sure many of you have taken part and completed the insight surveys previously. And the strength of our involvement work stream is really built on our relationships, so building our relationships with our involvement group members and our CF ambassadors that we'll meet later. So say the alternative to that is external involvement. So I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Lucy, and she's going to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Lorna. As she touched on, so I'm the involvement coordinator at the CF Trust. So I do some of the external things. So we're ensuring that the work of the trust. Oh, sorry, made a mistake there. We're working with research teams from universities and commercial pharmaceutical companies who are driving forward advances in treatments for CF. So we basically bring people from the CF community together with those who are working in research to make sure that the research is actually what people want and that the outcomes are meaningful to them. The trial is manageable for people taking part, and the information is written and presented in clear, understandable language and not just the scientific jargon. So, I mean, just to kind of use this analogy, so we've got February this month. I'm sure you've probably got a cup in front of you. Cheers, Lorna. Let's take what's in our cups as an example. So if I made all of you in this call a round of builder's tea with milk and sugar in it, I can guarantee that that wouldn't suit everybody. But if I did want to make you all a cup of tea, what would probably be better is that I ask you loads of questions to make sure it was right for you. And in fact, you might not even want that cup of tea at all. And so that's in essence what we're doing. We're making sure that it's right for the community. But you know, what do we actually do? We're essentially helping the people who are at the kettle talk to people who are drinking the drink. And we're supporting people with CF and those connected to them. As Lorna touched on, it's a kind of wide variety of people in that community to come together in a kind of informal and relaxed conversation with those developing the research and just helping them to understand what life with CF is really like and answer those questions they really need to be asking.
Great, thanks, Lucy. So Lucy touched on there really how we try to run our involvement work stream and particularly our focus group sessions. So we have focus groups for all sorts of research topics that we really try to conduct, say, in an informal and relaxed way, because it's through those relaxed conversations that we really gain those sort of like real nuggets of insight, which really inform the research teams, and they take away those real light bulb moments that can make changes to the plans that they're making. And so we hope that this evening reflects how our focus groups run. So I'm going to ask now for our staff members to turn on their cameras, and we're just going to talk through some of the variety of involvement activities that have taken place already within the trust. So I can't see everybody now that's on the call, but I just wanted to check, is Holly with us already? And if not, I'll start with Tracy.
I am here, Lorna.
Oh, there you are, I can see you. Thanks, Holly. So do you want to introduce yourself and what your role is at the trust, and then we'll talk about some of the activities you've done recently?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Holly. I'm the information manager at the trust, and something that I've been working, information manager. I basically manage our information library, so you might have seen some of our publications. We have things like family packs and school packs. We also have fact sheets on nutrition, physiotherapy, and we have consensus documents, which are used mostly by clinicians. So there's quite a broad range of resources that we work on, and that's my role, is managing those. So one of the projects that I worked on with Lorna recently to get kind of an involvement steer on was developing a new resource for young children around the age of 4 to 8 with CF. What we wanted was for it to explain what CF is, just be a very simple explainer. And we wanted to make sure it'd be something that young children would enjoy and that it would cover kind of age-appropriate topics. I think a lot of parents are a big fan of the Ollie and Nush video, but it was made about 10 years ago now, so we're really keen to get something that kind of does the same thing, but is a bit more up to date. So Lorna helped me to set up 2 working groups, one with parents of children with CF and one with parents who also have another child who doesn't have CF, so that we could get information about siblings as well, because we've heard that's quite, from a lot of bits of research, that siblings are kind of an underserved group. We really want to kind of produce something that works for them as well. So the working groups allowed us to have a number of parents, all with very different experiences of CF and children of different ages. And it kind of offered a space for them to talk together in a non-judgmental way about their experiences. They bounced off each other and talked about all sorts of kind of experience they'd had with their children, from, you know, going to school or first conversations about CF and how it impacts them. And also kind of talking about things that were challenging to explain maybe, or topics that they were kind of concerned about, and shared lots of kind of personal anecdotes, which were really kind of just really useful for us to get an idea of what it's like to be a CF parent, because I'm not myself, so creating a resource really needs that input. And we're really hoping we're going to be able to put all of their feedback into the resources and make sure that they look like a real representation of what CF is like in families. But I think most importantly, what was great was that the group's really beneficial to the parents, and we had some really nice feedback from one parent who had spoken with other parents at the very beginning when his child was first diagnosed, and he'd found that kind of a bit stressful and had decided not to do that for a while. And his feedback was that he actually found the conversations really positive, which for me is kind of the main takeaway, really, because obviously we really want help with our projects, but we also want to create spaces where people can talk and feel comfortable and leave feeling like they had a really nice evening. So that was my main takeaway from that. But yeah, sorry, I feel like I've rambled on a little bit, but yeah, that kind of covers what we worked on, Lorna and I, and the project's still ongoing. So yeah, if anyone has any interest in it, you can, I'm sure, be able to give my email out somehow. But yeah, it's really exciting project.
Brilliant, thanks, Holly. As you say, the focus groups we held were, really brought out some sort of like common topics between the parents, and it was really nice to see them bouncing ideas off each other. And I think that also came across. I know you mentioned the schools pack, and your colleague Juliet led on that. We held some focus groups to develop that, and the secondary schools pack was developed through those conversations, brought up some really key points that the children wanted to be able to raise with teachers and support staff at schools. So that pack's available on our website and might be useful as people are probably going back to school on the 8th of March now. Thank you, Holly. So Tracy, are you there, Tracy? There we are. Hello. So you're leading on a working group for a quality improvement project. Did you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the project and how you've been involving people?
Sure. So I'm the Clinical Quality Improvement Manager at the Trust. And last year we set up this Quality Improvement Working Group. And the idea is to have, yes, some Trust staff, but also people with cystic fibrosis, family members of people with cystic fibrosis, and CF healthcare staff, who all are going to co-design having a quality improvement strategy. The quality improvement department is relatively new. It was set up at the end of 2018. And it feels great to just be there and be able to say, okay, this is equal power. You're all going to be able to get dirty and say what you really want to be in there. So for anybody who's not kind of clear about a strategy, this is basically them setting what are going to be our values for the next 3 years, what are going to be the aims, and from that, the projects that we're going to be concentrating on. And our sort of secondary part of that is that we hope, as people are getting more comfortable in the working group, that they'll also be able to start doing some review of our current QI projects, which is the patient experience surveys and a staffing tool, and start giving us their decisions on what they would like to be the outcomes for those projects. So they're going to say what would be the determinant of success. How do we know that we've actually done a good job? Because I can set myself, you know, I could set an outcome, and it might matter a lot to me in the trust, but it needs to be, and this is what everyone who's just gone before me has said, it needs to be an outcome that we're sure is going to be changing an area of CF care that really matters to people who have CF, people who work in CF. That's what is crucial, not that we come up with something that just seems to fit best for us. So that's what we've set up so far. We've only been able to have one meeting for various reasons, but we're going to meet again in March. And I think we're really going to get our teeth into it then.
That's brilliant. I think there's a couple of things that you really touched on there, Tracy, that are so important, is that it's a continuous involvement work stream. And so you're continuously not even necessarily going back to the same people, but gathering, you know, sort of a broad range of opinion that can be fed into those working groups, as you say, to really ensure that the outcome at the end is the care services that matter to the people who are going to be using those and living through those care services. So that's brilliant. Thank you. And so I'm just going to move on to Paula now. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Paula. Would you like to introduce yourself, your role at the Trust, and talk a little bit about some of the involvement activity that we've been working on with you?
Sure. So as Lorna said, I'm Paula. I'm Head of Research at the Trust, and I'm really responsible for the grants award process and also for helping with the development of the research strategy by identifying new opportunities and by developing partnerships, one of which actually Jess will talk about a little bit later when we talk about external engagement or involvement. So as you all know, the Trust funds CF medical research, and the grants awards are overseen by a research grants review board. And this board really consists of academic clinicians, basic scientists, people with CF, and carers of children with CF. We really ask a lot of the board as they review and score all our applications. They suggest external expert reviewers. They review the collated responses from all the reviewers. They assess applicant responses from questions. And then they come to the board meeting and discuss and rank the applications at the board meeting. So we're really always looking for more involvement and perhaps different methods of involvement. So if you are interested and willing to devote a significant chunk of your time, please do get in touch. We're always open to this. And Zoe Elliott is a member of the board and could probably give like a little bit more of a different perspective and not from a non-scientific expert. I spoke to her today. So she was happy for me to mention that. And then, of course, the grants that we fund obviously naturally have to address the priorities of people with CF. And our process at the moment is to use the priorities that were defined by the James Lind Alliance Priority Setting Partnership. But we're aware now that the world's changed significantly since those priorities were defined. I mean, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and this has changed to CF care in many ways and has lots of other wide-ranging effects. And we have some people have access to Kaftrio and the effects of that. And of course, one of the main priorities, which still remains, is to look after the group for which the current modulators don't work. So we'd like to refresh the research strategy, and we really hope that you all participate in this. We are really at the very beginning stages of it and defining the setup of it, but obviously we'll reach out when we're ready to begin the process. If you would like to play a bigger role in the process, though, please do reach out to us again.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paula. I think, as you touched on there, the James Lind Alliance work that was done several years ago, that was actually priority setting exercise working with the community, wasn't it? So it really defined the top 10 research priorities according to people living with CF and their families, and that has really guided where the trust has invested in research subsequently.
Absolutely.
But as you say, it's a whole new world. There's been massive changes, and we really need to ensure that the research priorities going forward reflect the current needs for people living with CF. So as you say, we're going to be running that exercise or starting that exercise. It's going to be an ongoing one. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Paula.
Great.
And on to Kat. I can see you're there. I could see you on my screen. Would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hello, everyone. I'm Kat. I'm Head of Corporate Partnerships. Lorna, should I go straight into talking about sort of how involvement matters?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So yes, so I work within the fundraising team, and my role is specifically about developing relationships with companies to encourage them to donate or fundraise to us. But involvement's important to our corporate donors, but it's also important to everyone. And as I'm sure I don't need to explain, those donors are the reason why we're able to do what we do. We're able to do the research, provide information and support, give out welfare grants. All the amazing stuff that the trust does happens because we were able to get funding for it. And involvement's incredibly important in that process. It's really the personal experience and the impact of what we do that gives a donor a reason for choosing us, and particularly if you take maybe corporate donors or trusts and foundations, often they're talking to hundreds of charities and they've got to choose from hundreds, and actually it's the personal experience that gives them the emotional connection. Look beyond the facts and figures that are really important, but gives them a reason to want to support us. And just to echo what Tracy was saying about what's important to them is seeing the difference, making sure that we are informed by the needs of people with CF and their families, and that we're providing solutions that they want and need too. And just to give you a few examples of how people can get involved. So there's things as simple as giving feedback on fundraising products or ideas. So we might go to the involvement group and say, we've got this idea, we want to call it this, what do you think? They might say, no, don't do that, or what about this? And that insight's really important for sort of shaping things that we do that are relevant, inclusive, and resonate with people. And then there's also more individual contributions. So with some of our bigger funders, the application process can be really quite in depth, and it can take weeks, if not months. And we've had individual contributions from, say, Isabel, who I know is here, I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her, who kindly did a video for us to go with a major application, just highlighting the experience of shielding and the impact of the pandemic. And that was really powerful and went really well with our application. And also Luke, who I think is here today as well, he kindly joined a corporate meeting to talk again about his experience, and I know how much our corporate partner appreciated that. So I think for me, it's a way of making sure we reflect what people with CF want and need and their experience, and also a way to engage donors in a really meaningful way and encouraging them to support the trust.
It was brilliant. Thanks, Kat. And I think that shows the sort of like complete chain, doesn't it? It's, as you say, it's how you approach those donors and how you show them the real human connection, and ultimately leads to those funds being raised that can then go on and support the work that Paul has just talked about in developing new treatments and hopefully, you know, enhancing the future for everyone with CF.
Yes, and just one quick thing to add, just echoing what Paula said, if anyone else wants to get involved, we very much welcome a range of people with skills, experience who want to get involved, whether that's something quite little or quite big. So yeah.
That's great, and I think that's the important thing as well. Joining a program or a particular project, it could be joining a focus group for an hour and a half, it could be reading a document, it could be feeding back on a draft of one of the comics that Holly's creating. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Kat. And I'm going to move on to Michaela. Are you there?
Hi everyone, I am here.
Hi Michaela, do you want to introduce yourself and your role at the Trust?
So hi everyone, I'm Michaela. I'm the Clinical Affairs and Commissioning Advisor, but I sit mainly on the policy team. So the policy team does quite a variety of work. So we would work on different issues across transplant, welfare, healthcare data, access to meds, changes to care, so things like the home virtual consultations and the home spirometry that came into effect during the pandemic. So we do all this through different ways. So we might do this through consultation responses. We might do this through going to different meetings and discussing it with policymakers. And we also do a lot of this by speaking to the UK Cystic Fibrosis Medical Association, also known as the UK CFMA. So where does this mean for patient involvement? So patient involvement is critical to everything we do. From the broadest sense, you know, just by speaking to people with CF, it helps us identify what areas are still areas of concern, what issues are happening in each area. There's a very big difference in saying, I need access to food because I'm shielding, and knowing what are the issues of access to food. So a good example is when the government boxes were announced, we thought, okay, they've got access to food, they're sorted, but it actually was through, you know, feedback in the helpline, feedback through social media, and feedback with direct communication with the CF community that we realized, okay, they're not getting the right types of food. So for instance, they were getting skimmed milk, they were getting low-fat yogurt, and it all makes it a lot harder to get the calorie intake, but also the fat you need to take your modulators. And it's only by having this input that we understood those issues. More specifically, we also have continuous feedback from the community by our clinical advisory group. So we have lay members on the clinical advisory group. We have 2 parents of children with CF and 2 people with CF. And they're very helpful because they give feedback on the clinical issues so that we always understand that the patient needs to stay at the heart of everything we do. We've also benefited from patient feedback when we were working on Kaftrio. So we were working on putting together a consultation response for NICE to get it approved. And what we did is we launched a survey to understand, you know, what does it matter when it comes to day-to-day, you know, how can it impact you, not just regards to work, but maybe wanting to go out to socialize, or your impact of your mental health, or wider impact, for instance, on your relatives, your carers, your, you know, girlfriends, boyfriends, friends, anything, because that's exactly what, you know, is important to live a life unlimited, is having these relationships and being able to feel as normal as possible. So yeah, we literally can't do anything without our patient involvement, and it's so valuable to hear it. And particularly someone who's only been working at the Trust for 18 months, you know, I didn't know much about cystic fibrosis before I joined, and just having this opportunity to learn so that I can advocate for the best of my knowledge. You know, I couldn't do that without patient involvement, so that I'm continuously learning about the different issues that are facing people. Because as Lucy pointed out at the beginning of this live event, you know, everyone is different. So not everyone's experiencing the same issues, the same worries, same concerns. So hearing it, especially from such a small community, that's very powerful and should not be underestimated.
Great, thanks, Michaela. As you say, you need to really consider that there's such a range of opinions, such a range of experiences, and the more conversations that we have with people, the more focus groups we have, the more chance there is that all of that information and those insights are drawn out and can really inform that work. As you say, you know, with Kaftrio, it's really crucial that we can demonstrate one of the key things that comes through in so many of the focus groups, and I know lots of you on the call will have heard me already mention this, it's stability in health. because stability enables you to plan. It enables you to plan the day out. It enables you to plan a weekend away. It enables you to plan maybe even a holiday next year. If we're all lucky, we'll keep our fingers crossed. But yeah, that ability to plan and not feel like you're constantly having the rug pulled out from under your feet and living with the disruption and chaos that infections bring to your life, really. Yeah. Thanks, Michaela. And then Charlie.
Hello.
Hi, Charlie. Do you want to introduce yourself and your role at the Trust, please?
Yes, so I'm Charlie. I'm the content producer at the Cystic Fibrosis Trust. So a large part of my role is telling stories and working with the community or supporting them to share stories and experiences of what it's like to live with CF. And so when it comes to involvement, a large part of that is updating the community by sharing stories about how people have become involved. So a recent project that myself and Lorna were involved in was we wrote an article for CF Life, which is our annual magazine, biannual magazine. And in that we interviewed 4 members of the CF community. So that was a CF trial coordinator, a parent and her child with CF, and also an adult living with CF. And we basically were talking about clinical trials and just how they were involved. And it was a really lovely conversation. We just set up a Zoom, and yeah, it was just a great chance to chat. And I think I've been working for the Trust for about 1.5 years, so I'm learning quite a lot about clinical trials, and it was just a really great experience to hear basically just their personal views and how things have changed. We talked about how I think my favorite thing I remember was someone talking about how a particular trial used to turn your teeth black, which was great to know things have moved on since then. But yeah, so from that, then I wrote up a really nice personal story from that, which was just a conversation between the 4 of them, and a really nice reflection of the voice of the community, something that was very personable and yeah, very accurate reflection of what it's like to live with CF and the experiences of that.
That's brilliant. No, it was such a good conversation, wasn't it, Charlie? And as you say, it was Jane, and I know Jane won't mind me saying that she's one of our older involvement group members, and she's got loads of trials experience, so she's got so much experience to share. Her insights are amazing. And you say it was a long time ago when she was very young and she took part in a trial that actually turned her teeth black. And it's that kind of thing that needs feeding back to these research teams of what's acceptable, what's tolerable. And as you say, we had Bethan on the call as well, who was just 11 at the time, and her face was horrified. And Bethan's taken part in trials. She realised it was a completely different situation now. So yeah, say involvement in clinical trials has to be differentiated between participation in clinical trials. So participation in a clinical trial is actually taking part in something, but involvement in clinical trials, say, is really informing the shape and design of a trial, and say making sure that the schedule is tolerable by people living with CF, that's going to fit in around their life, their school, their work, their family, their existing appointment schedule, their existing treatment regime. So yeah, there's a lot to consider, and I think quite a bit of that actually came through in that article, so that's brilliant. Thanks, Charlie. So as we said, there's really sort of like 2 routes of involvement, and the other is external. So I say Lucy mentioned earlier how we really act as a conduit between our involvement group members and various research groups and external organisations, and hopefully can really channel those insights and experiences so that they can help define that research. So I've got a couple of people who we've been working with on various projects. So Jess and Jamie, if you want to pop your cameras on. And I was going to start with Jess, if you're there.
Yeah.
Hi, would you like to introduce yourself and your role and where you work? That would be great, thank you.
Yeah, so my name's Jess. I am a senior programme manager and I work in the Medicines Discovery Catapult. So we are a government-funded, not-for-profit organisation And the overall aim of the organisation is to reshape medicines discovery in the UK. And part of my role is to work with the Cystic Fibrosis Trust in partnership on a national programme called the Cystic Fibrosis Syndicate in Antimicrobial Resistance, where we've pulled together expertise from people with CF, from pharmaceutical companies, from academia, and together we're working to accelerate the treatment, accelerate new treatments for CF infections to the clinic. So we have involved people with CF throughout the programme, and we've actually involved people with CF strategically in the programme. So we work with a steering committee, which includes industry, academia, people with CF. And I remember at the first meeting of the group, we were actually sat in a meeting room who were there were talking about the fact that sputum samples from people with CF are just so important and such a critical tool for drug development. And Laura, I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, who has CF, mentioned that she had no idea that sputum samples were so valuable for drug development. And she said, you know, I expectorate sputum and I actually throw it in the bin every day. And if I knew that I could make use of those samples and give them to companies who are developing treatments, I would do it in a heartbeat. And because of that, we've actually developed plans to set up a CF biorepository where we'll collect these samples across the UK and enable their access to support drug discovery. And another conversation we had with Ollie, who has CF, he said, wouldn't it be great if people who had donated those samples could then get a text to say that actually their sample had been used. And now we're actually linking with software companies to see how we can enable that to happen. So it's been extremely important to have people with CF involved in what we do, and it's shaped the strategy of this national programme. I've also worked with you, Lorna, on running focus groups on other specific projects from the syndicate. So we've engaged people with CF on a project to develop guidance for pharmaceutical companies and others who are developing drugs. So these are called target product profiles, and they're really there to define the needs and priorities of people with CF when it comes to drug development. So we hosted a focus group with 6 people who either had CF or they had a child or a grandchild with CF. And it really struck me in that meeting how high the burden of care for people with CF is, and how difficult it can be to manage many different treatments, and even, for example, taking some medications just to try and treat symptoms that you're getting from other medications. And actually that input has been critical to the development of these tools. And today we are now launching this document that we've created along with people with CF, with companies, with academics, and we're launching this to the community to try and seek further input and advice. So I think a message will go into the chat, and we'd be absolutely so grateful if you would look over this document to really ensure it is expressing the needs and priorities of people with CF. And the aim will be to ultimately publish this, provide it globally to companies who are developing CF treatments to ensure that treatments of the future are really meeting the needs and priorities of the people who will be taking them.
Brilliant, thanks, Jess. I think the really crucial thing that I felt the focus group helped with the target product profiles was how early we were able to involve people with CF in that process. You know, we were talking about, as you say, how a medication is going to be developed. So it's not talking about a specific treatment that's in development, but just the general information around those, so that tablets are easy to swallow, what the coating is like, how often you're going to take them a day, how many times are you expected to fit something into your daily regime around something else, what impact is that going to have, as you say, if it's going to have some mild side effects, are those side effects actually tolerable, and if there are some side effects and they are tolerable, are you actually going to have to take some more medication to treat those side effects? Looking at, as you say, the dosing regime, how long you're going to have to take something, whether it's orally, by nebulizer, via IVs. There's such a range of information, how you're going to store your medicine. And I know that all the other families out there are going to be thinking, oh my goodness, I've got a cupboard designated to our CF medication. You know, it's literally, how do we store these things? And if it's something that needs to be refrigerated, that impacts on people's days. That impacts on you being able to take your child to a venture park for the day, or, you know, for an adult who's wanting to travel, if you've got refrigerated medication, it's just an added complication. So it was a real pleasure to get involved at such an early stage. And I also agree, you know, the work that we did, or that was carried out around the NTM treatment development, as you say, sputum samples are so precious. And when we heard that one of the research teams was struggling to get sputum samples, and we knew that people were momentarily producing more sputum as they were starting Kaftrio, we couldn't bear the thought that this was going in the bin or even being flushed down the loo. So we developed a rapid response to that, working with the community as well. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Jess. And then I'm going to move on to Jamie. Are you there, Jamie?
Yeah, you caught me having a cuppa. Sorry.
Brilliant.
Lorna.
Good. That's all right. Yeah. I've got mine as well. That's perfect. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us where you work and what you do?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Jamie Duckers and I'm one of the CF consultants based in Cardiff in the Adult CF Centre. And it's great to be here because I honestly believe CF has got where it has got so quickly because of involvement. And going to a couple of meetings today where people are talking about value-based healthcare, and I was just slightly astounded because they gave the definition of it and they're talking about outcomes that matter to patients divided by cost, and yet people don't really talk about what matters. And I think the future of CF, I feel, is going to be about redesigning services as well as research as well. And so when Lorna said, come along to this, it's great. But when we talk to some of our patients, what we found is why they don't get involved is when you do a sort of straw poll at our place, they're like, well, we don't feel we can contribute anything to it. But then when you look at the sort of stats, we're doing something at the moment about patient leadership and partnering with patients to redesign services. And then you look at the stats, and people with CF probably spend less than 1% of their time in contact with the healthcare professionals. The other 99% of the time, they're managing their own condition. So you are experts. And I guess the big thing in this is the lived experience. And that's what we miss from the healthcare professional side. We don't have that. And so what we were doing with the patient leadership course was a bit like, do you know some of those old pictures of like Victorian wards where there's loads of doctors and nurses in sort of white coats standing around the bed telling people what's going to do? I think the future of CF care is so different. It's a bit like Lewis Hamilton, isn't it? The healthcare people are almost like the pit stop. Person with CF is driving their condition, they're leading the condition, they're designing what's going to happen. We're there to help you with the tire, or to do this or to do that, so I think the future of CF will change with that. So just a couple of examples of what we're doing. Obviously with COVID and redesign of services, we're doing lots of virtual work, so virtual leisure centres, virtual psychology groups. And obviously we don't want to do what Lucy said at the start of design a service, you know, give people builder's tea when they don't want builder's tea. It doesn't suit people. So we're doing some work with Dan Beaver, who's actually got CF himself, and lots of you may know him. He's going to be looking at doing research on the use of virtual clinics and getting people involved. So if you want to Google him, he's on Cystic Fibrosis PhD journey. He's desperate for people to help, because I really think that going forward, it's going to be designing what the service looks like for people with CF. And I guess the other big area is research. I know people have been talking about just sort of light bulb moments of when we've realized we have totally missed the ball. You know, we've totally missed the point. And one example recently was trying to design a research project to put a grant in, and we know that exercise is really important. We know that it's going to be a really big part of care in the future. And I just assumed, oh, well, everyone will want to do exercise virtually. We'll just offer the same thing. We'll offer builder's tea, do it virtually. And some of the input we had from your group, Lorna, people like Natalie Schrupp-Money saying completely changed that project. It was a total light bulb moment. They were very much like, well, it's great, we'd like to do virtual, but we want to do this, this, this. We want the choice. We want to be able to dip in and dip out. We want feedback. We want to be able to go and do ballet. You're not catering for that. So we want something more bespoke, something more adaptable. It completely changed, and we would have gone off a completely different tangent had we not had that input. The other thing was, when we were even designing what's the end point, what are we measuring, we realized that we're measuring something that doesn't matter to people. We're just measuring something randomly. So even that, what seemed like it might be quite basic, important question. What you were saying about what's acceptable, I remember sat in with Jess and we were saying, oh, well, if we just design another tablet and then just take it, we had no concept of, well, you need to leave it 2 hours. That's a complete game changer. Or waking up a child to give a 12-hourly dose at night. You know, it's that lived experience that perhaps, and don't be scared to express it, because people that are in a research lab or like myself may not have that concept. We did it recently designing an architecture project, and I was worried we were looking at the wrong thing and testing too many things, and our feedback was no, absolutely not. We want to know if there's damp, we want to know the questionnaire, we want to know the humidity. And then when you sit in an ethics committee or a research board, it is amazing, or the sort of really lab-based people may have written something that makes perfect sense to them. And then when you sit next to somebody living with that condition, they're reading the information sheet and it makes no sense at all. So just that real jargon busting, and just people have completely refined the question to make it so much more relevant. And there's lots of research that shows the earlier you involve people with that condition, the quicker a drug gets to market, the better the recruitment is into that trial, the more motivated the research team is, and even the dissemination of the results of the research. So I think there's so many avenues. And another example is one that you really helped us with, which is looking at a shared decision-making tool when you're thinking about starting a family. And I'm going to do another plug, actually, if you don't mind, but if you Google CF Prosper, the research team are desperate to speak to people, carers, family members, people with CF when they're making decisions about starting a family. And we've just been astounded by some of the survey results. Again, a bit like you mentioned with the James Lind Alliance, was not what we expected. And so that sort of input has been invaluable. And I'd still argue that that's why CF care is progressing so quickly.
Thanks, Jamie. You touched on so many things there that I think really demonstrate how engaged the CF community is. You know, it's a lifelong condition. We learn it from the day of diagnosis and learn it inside out. And, you know, we'll be moving on in a minute to talk to our CF ambassadors, and they are absolutely experts by experience. You don't need to know about science. You don't need to know about policy or programs or medicines or anything like that. The knowledge that you have about CF and how it affects your daily life is what's really key. And again, as you mentioned, the earlier you involve people with your research ideas, even before it's almost got onto paper, is so beneficial. As you say, there's a cost saving element. You reduce research waste. Don't start developing something and spending time and money on something that actually, as you say, is not going to fulfill the needs and desires of the people that it's meant to be aimed at. So, and that's really key, I think, with commercial pharma companies, because to them, time is money. And if you can design a trial or a piece of research that they're going to recruit to more easily and quicker, they're going to save money right from the outset. And hopefully that trial will then complete more quickly. The results will be available more quickly. And involving people at every stage along that route is absolutely key. You've mentioned a couple of projects there. As I say, we're really pleased that we've had involvement opportunity. We've run focus groups for both of those. We've helped with designing the survey schedule for CF Prosper and getting the questions together. So it's not even just about talking about the projects and then hopefully sharing the survey that comes. It's being involved in how the survey is structured as well. Like you say, it's asking the right questions in the right manner that you get the right information. Yeah, so the links to both of those are in the chat. That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Cheers, Paul.
So just going to move on to our last group, and I did tell them I will call them the stars of the show because they absolutely are. Let's say these are people who are members of our involvement group. They are some of our CF ambassadors, and they've been involved in a range of activities. And as Jamie said, they're really experts by experience, and they can really bring so much, I say, with their insight and experience of living with CF and how it literally weaves through so many aspects of daily life. So if you'd like to put your cameras on, guys, and we're going to start with Luke. Are you there, Luke?
Yes, hello, Lorna, good evening.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself and what your connection to CF is?
Yeah, so hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Luke, I'm 48 with CF. And I've been an ambassador for the CF Trust for almost a year now. I had a double lung transplant almost 2 years ago. And I was also, it's sort of a claim to fame in a way. I was the first UK CF patient to be diagnosed with NTM abscessus in 2003.
Brilliant, thank you. And you've really joined in such a variety of involvement activities. We've already heard from a couple of members in the staff section where you've already contributed great insights to some of the work. But say one of the first activities that you joined with regard to being a CF ambassador was actually on the target product profiles that Jess was talking about earlier. Can you tell us a bit about that experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that was a really interesting and exciting project to start with as my with my involvement with the trust. It really drew on experiences from a whole cross section of the CF patient community in order to set a more customized set of guidelines for clinicians and practitioners when they are thinking about treatment plans and drug regimes for those with CF. You know, by doing so, they can at least do their utmost to minimize the invasiveness and intrusion into the lives of CF, as well as obviously their families and people around them. As we've heard from Lucy and others tonight, CF is, as we all know, not a one-size-fits-all disease. And the more customization and bespoke modeling of treatment plans is definitely the way forward. And the TPP project in particular was very much geared to trying to manipulate treatment plans geared more to specific age groups and the sort of lives that those age groups lead and the other burdens and requirements and other things that they're doing with their lives at the time. And it allows them to, you know, in consideration of having to take new drugs, helping them to lead the lives they want to lead rather than the lives that CF is trying to dictate them to lead.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And so that impact that your insights brought to those focus groups, can you describe how you feel that say those impacts were really brought into those meetings? What do you think it actually led to? Well,
the focus group, I mean, first and foremost, you know, I came into it was the first one I did. I didn't know what to expect, but I found it really engaging, a really relaxed atmosphere. And above all, it was just nice to sit in that sort of atmosphere and just talk to, you know, other folks with CF. It was really nice. You know, we don't get to do that very much these days. And it's just a nice forum, if you like, just to chat things over and to share experience. And I enjoyed it from that point of view. But in terms of the project itself, what I think, you know, I could bring to that project, and what's been resultant from it is, you know, I've seen the report that Jess has talked about that's just come out, and you know, she's welcoming other input into that. But you know, I've read through that draft report, and it's so nice to see that the comments that, you know, I recall were made on that evening in that focus group, there in black and white in that report. And it really makes you feel that, you know, you can make a real and tangible difference to the work that the trust and its, you know, partners and stakeholders, you know, are doing in order to make everybody's lives the better. And if I might just sort of say, Lorna, that, you know, before becoming involved in the trust, I'm, you know, you could have almost put me down as a CF Trust skeptic in a way. I was definitely one of those, you know, people who thought, I'm one of, you know, 10,600 in the UK with CF. I'm one voice, you know, who's going to listen to me? Who's going to listen to my experience? Who's going to take that on board? And how is that going to actually manage to change anything? And, you know, the TPP is a fantastic example of, you know, that document would not exist with CF and the people that participated in that focus group. And as I say, it's so nice to see what came out of that evening there in black and white in a report that will go on to shape the lives, and, you know, shape the lives of those with CF, the people around them, and so much for the better, you know, as we head into what I consider to be a very bright future.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks, Luke. And I'm so pleased that you enjoyed that first experience, because I know that, you know, you've gone on to have lots more involvement opportunities. And, you know, as you say, it's coming together with the focus groups. It's actually just really nice to be able to get together and talk to people who have similar experiences. So, yeah, it's been great having you. Thanks for that.
Thanks very much.
And I'm going to move on to Isabel. Are you there?
Hi, Lorna.
You're there and ready.
I am.
Thanks again for joining. And again, we've already heard how you've been involved in some aspects of the work of the Trust, and along with Jamie as well in some of the work that he's been doing. So I wondered whether you wanted to describe some of the involvement activities you've taken part in. There have been so many focus groups. We've had rants about nebulizer design and, you know, the changing future of CF and all the different aspects that, you know, we think need addressing. So yeah, would you like to describe some of those?
Yeah, they definitely are rants, especially about the nebulizer. Yeah, no, it's been good to just get a wide breadth of kind of information as well from these focus groups. You know, the Trust are looking into so many different avenues of things like the nebulizer, and the focus groups are nice to kind of have that perspective of what's going on, but also give you the opportunity to actually design what you want from your care. Especially around like things like the nebulizer design and the stuff with Jamie, you know, and exercise. It's been a great opportunity to kind of explain to people what we ideally want for our lives. So it's kind of like us saying what we want for ourselves instead of being governed by what CF and our doctors kind of tell us to do.
Yeah, exactly. That is, they're the exact, as I say, insights that are absolutely needed to drive things forward like that. And both you and Luke actually joined the focus groups for the 3-year strategy development as well. And I know, you know, we've had other conversations looking at, you know, the future changes for the CF landscape generally, and how that's going to impact not just on physical health, mental health and well-being particularly. We've talked about life coaching, and I know your work gives you a good insight, but looking at all those kind of like life admin areas that are really going to need addressing, and again driving by people with CF. Do you want to talk around some of those as well?
Yeah, so with Jamie's project, it was kind of to make, you know, Jamie's project was about like airway clearance and using exercise for it. And I'm somebody who I've never found airway clearance that useful. So to hear that somebody was looking into exercise was a great opportunity, I felt, and also helped to kind of look at other things aside from our lung function. You know, exercise could help with our body images, with our, you know, our back muscles because they're weak from coughing. And I'd also done the body image guide a couple of years previously, which was kind of about things like this. So it was stuff like that that really I felt was beneficial to join in on. And yeah, doing the video for the mental health grant for CAT, you know, it was really nice to feel like in the moment in time, especially with COVID, that, you know, things were being looked into, which were really impacting, you know, people in our community at that time.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thanks, Isabel. I say there's been such a range of opportunities, and you know, as I said to Lou, it's really been good to have you on board and involved in so many areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move on to Martin. Poor Martin is one of our newest members of the involvement group, and he didn't know what he was letting himself in for. Are you there, Martin?
Yeah, hi, Lorna.
Hi there. Did you want to just introduce yourself and obviously your CF connection?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Martin. I'm 41 from London. I have CF. Yeah, like Lorna said, I'm very new to this. I don't think I've earned star status yet, but yeah, maybe one day I'll get there. But yeah, that's me. I've been on the focus group team for like a month now, so yeah, very new. Yeah.
So what was it that inspired you to get in touch and start to look at some involvement activities?
Basically, it's kind of reiterating what everyone's been saying so far throughout the evening. I kind of think that in any healthcare organisation, you need the people who are benefiting from it to have a voice in the decision-making processes. Like whether that's a PPI at your hospital or your GP surgery or even your local CCG. And obviously as someone with CF, CF is such a life-dominating illness that, yeah, it just felt quite pertinent for me to see if there was something I could do with the CF Trust. And yeah, the focus groups were a way I could do that. So yeah, that's why I got in touch in the first place.
Yeah, it's great. And you came along and joined one of our focus groups almost instantaneously, which was brilliant. And perhaps probably a topic that you weren't expecting to be discussing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically, it was a study looking into whether yoga can benefit people with CF. And yoga is not really anything I've thought about in the past much, but anything to do with preventive health, like anything that can make us feel better or stop us getting ill, I'm all over that. So it was really interesting for me. But like I say, I've never really thought much about yoga, and I think in a way that might have been quite useful for the people in the organising the group, because there'll be a lot of people with CF out there who aren't into yoga. So I think it was quite useful for them to have a voice of someone who I guess they'd want to convert, if anything. It was a really good experience, and like I say, anything to do with preventive health like that, I'm all over it. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it really felt like they were taking our opinions on board as well. I didn't feel like a box ticking exercise or anything. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, that's great. And you've actually gone on to be a patient representative with that project as well, as you say, so you're bringing in those views and opinions of people that wouldn't necessarily consider yoga, so you can really maintain that difference of focus going, you know, throughout that project. So yeah, it's brilliant. So glad to join, Martin.
Cheers, Lorna. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we're going to move on to Jade. Hi, Jade. Are you there?
Hi, yeah, just sorry, I'm muting myself.
That's okay. Would you like to introduce yourself and your connection with CF?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, I'm Jade. I'm 24, living with CF up in Manchester at the moment. So I have a degree, a master's in biomedical sciences, which kind of gives me a bit of a more unique outlook on CF, like being a patient expert because I have it, but also I have the opportunity to study it and have that background as well.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And I think, you know, that background really brought a lot of value into the sort of like early involvement in the trust. And I know you were part of the youth involvement, the youth group for quite a while. And it was actually an idea and a suggestion that you came forward with as we were starting the Clinical Trials Accelerator platform that really helped. Did you want to mention that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you said, part of the youth advisory group. And I'd love to talk a bit more about that, because first and foremost, that was the first opportunity I'd ever had to talk to other people with CF, which was so great, and something that I think is really carried forward in all of the involvement that the CF Trust does and that I've been involved with. It's something that's of great value to me. But yeah, through the Youth Advisory Group, I was able to get a few more connections within the Trust, and I sort of pitched this idea, developed a storyboard, very rough, of a video geared towards young people, to really get them to understand and engage with clinical trials. So I think that's so crucial in driving good research and progress. Is, you know, we as a community have to get involved. So as part of that, I helped develop a storyboard, as I said, and I actually had the opportunity to do the voiceover, which was really fun, a bit nerve-wracking, and obviously it's a bit, but yeah, good fun.
Yeah, I think everyone thinks that about their own voice, but as I say, it was perfect time, perfect opportunity, because it was as the Trials Accelerator platform was setting up, and it was really key that we had that message from somebody, you know, who's living with CF in their own words and their own voice, but also with the added benefit, say, of your educational background. So that was great. And subsequently, you've also joined some focus groups, and I say one of those was actually looking at the burden of care, which was the #1 priority through the James Lind Alliance exercise that we mentioned earlier. And that focus group has subsequently led on to the development of the CF Storm trial that's going to be opening in the spring, looking at reducing, hopefully being able to reduce the use of nebulizers for mucolytics, so DNAs and hypertonic saline. So yeah, it's been really important to have you on those focus groups. I know you've joined quite a few focus groups, haven't you?
Yeah, I have, and I think one thing that I really love about, you know, being an ambassador, as well as like getting to know all the other lovely people on this call and others, is that I feel like I'm involved at several different touch points throughout the growth of a research idea, a research project. Like, you know, just earlier this week, I gave you some feedback on, I think, a survey that is due to go live quite soon, and that had culminated from focus groups that I think happened in January 2020. So yeah, before all of this COVID mess. But yeah, no, it's just lovely to feel like your voice is really heard, like throughout a project, and also on the focus group meetings that we have. I don't think there's ever been a meeting where I haven't had my opinion challenged or changed, just by hearing other people's experiences and, you know, thinking about things in a different way. It's so valuable, and I love that we can all just have this discussion and come to a good consensus.
It's brilliant. And I say your educational background as well has actually supported us in being able to make sure that some of the wording with regard to the summaries around trials has been written in the right language. You know, say your science writing skills have really contributed to that. Yeah, we've been really grateful for that as well. So yeah, like you say, lots of involvement at lots of different touch points.
Yeah, no, I'm really passionate about sort of scientific storytelling and writing for lay audiences and that sort of engagement. So yeah, I've been very happy to help.
It's been fantastic. Thanks, Jade.
Thanks,
and now we're going to move on to Jacob. Hi, Jacob.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very good.
Would you like to introduce yourself and again your connection with CF?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Jacob. I'm a master's student at Durham University, studying chemistry and biochemistry, very similar to Jade. And I also have cystic fibrosis. And I've been able to, very similar to Jade as well, apply a lot of those educational background and my own personal experience with CF to various different projects, one of being the Casper CF trial, which is a clinical trial that looks at Aspergillus infection in children and young people with cystic fibrosis. So I lead the involvement in that, which is taken up a really good part of my last year.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because you were actually already involved with that. You'd already found out what involvement was and some opening and opportunity to get involved before really joining the involvement work stream at the Trust. And you coming along with that understanding was absolutely fantastic. And I say, you've again subsequently joined several of the focus groups looking at the development of NTM treatment. Well, there's been quite a variety, hasn't there? Yeah. And now you've actually gone on to join the steering committee, as I say, for CF Storm, that's going to be opening in the spring.
Yep, just got involved with that, which has been similar to my role with Casper CF as well, which has been good to kind of build those experiences and share stuff that we might have learned, for example, on that clinical trial, be able to feed that into another one to make that process quicker and easier for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that again shows how involvement works all the way through. So it's not just a clinical trial looking at the proposal, looking at it from the outset, but say really ensuring that the views and opinions of people with CF are there the whole way through. So at every stage, the focus is really being maintained on the CF community.
Yeah, I think with the Casper CF trial in particular, there's a real foundation of involvement in the whole protocol has been written with patients involved. There's always been someone with CF on the trial steering group and getting continual feedback on, what do you think about this? What don't you like about that? Is not just beneficial for the patients because, those that will be involved in the trial have a better experience, but actually it pushes the research towards something that is actually more useful in the long term. So it's in both patients and researchers' interests to carry out good, thorough involvement and build a trial around that.
That's fantastic. I'm really pleased that you've joined the steering committee. That's fantastic. Thank you. And then finally, Esther.
Hi.
Hi, Esther.
Everyone.
Lovely to see you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Esther Valentine. I'm a CF parent and CF ambassador. I am mum to Joshua, who has cystic fibrosis, and he's 5 years old and doing really well. He's under the Royal Berkshire Hospital and Oxfordshire as well. So Lorna, you mentioned the RSOB on the call a few times. So I've been a parent rep on the RSOB for the past few years, and I've also been part of the involvement team, probably going back almost 5 years now, I would say. So it's been really enjoyable to have a lot of variation of different roles and really rewarding work.
Yes, you've been involved in so much from the outset. So, right from really the conception of the Clinical Trials Accelerator platform, how we pull together information to let people know about clinical trials, what opportunities there were, where trials were taking place. You also helped out with the development of some of the clinical trials information, and particularly one of the latest additions to that has been the Junior Agents comic that you and Joshua both got involved in. Joshua's review and feedback was just delightful.
Yeah, that was probably one of the nicest pieces of involvement that I've been on. So I guess it initially started out as, looking at the clinical trials platform and the clinical trials tracker that you've all probably seen on the CF Trust website, and just looking at the information and the content of that and ensuring that it's appropriate, and relevant to the CF community. And then just thinking about all the different age groups we have, with CF. We've got children, as you say, adolescents and adults. And one of the nicest pieces of work that we got to do together was looking at the clinical trial information for children, and just looking at, the language and how, it was actually quite a fun piece of material to read. And you know, basically it said about, you know, if you sign up to a clinical trial, you get to be like a junior agent. And you know, I was reading it to my son, and he really loved it, because he wanted to sign up to a clinical trial because he felt like he'd become like a CF superstar or superhero. So it got him really engaged and really interested. And I think that's what you need, isn't it? You know, to make the content appropriate for the age group and make it engaging.
Yeah, it's a tricky topic and a tricky subject to know how to introduce to children, particularly, you know, if you start talking to them about a clinical trial, it's language that they don't understand. What is a clinical trial? It's completely meaningless to them. And as you say, we talked about it with them being junior agents, and the clinical trial is the mission, that they can come together and they know that they're part of a team, so that, you know, there's lots of other children like them who are all taking part. And even though they may not see them, they see their doctor, who is really sort of like mission control, or M or Q.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that, I guess that also feeds into, you know, the work we did on the RSOB as well, the Research Oversight Board, and just making sure that, you know, when we are reviewing clinical trials, that it's appropriate for, you know, people of the age group that are going to participate in the trial. And I think the role really involved in, you know, being a parent rep on the RSOB was around, you know, providing be a parent to a child with CF, you know, the daily grind of the CF treatments, the ups and downs that CF life naturally brings. And when reviewing those trials, you know, particularly looking from a parent's perspective at the hospital visits, the investigations, you know, how manageable are they around work and school, and, you know, the daily treatment burden that we already have on our plates. So I found it really rewarding, and I felt that the feedback that we provided as, you know, the CF community, it was invaluable to clinicians and researchers. I think Jamie touched on that earlier, you know, who don't necessarily have that firsthand experience that we do of what it's like to be a parent to a CF child, or, you know, what it's like to have CF in your life. And it's just been amazing to see how that feedback has, you know, helped to shape and enhance clinical trial designs. And I just think it makes it really rewarding. And I think, you know, you see the rewards and you see the advancements of clinical trials, and it's great to think, you know, we've been a part of that. We did that as a CF community.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Esther. And I know that you've come to the end of your 3-year term on the RSOB, but I know that that won't be the end of your involvement with the trust.
No, definitely not. I'm more than happy to stay involved, and, you know, there's so much variety, and it's so relaxed as well. You know, like you say, you can put as much or as little as you can into it, you know, depending on what you've got going on in your life. So if anyone is thinking of, you know, getting involved, it's, you know, it's really rewarding.
It's great to hear. Thanks, Esther. Thanks for joining tonight as well.
No, you're welcome.
So Lucy, it's just down to us to wrap up, and we're completely running over time. So we're going to have to do a real whistle stop end to tonight's event. Lucy, did you just want to talk about some involvement activity that you've got coming up?
Yeah, so I mean, we touched a little bit on, I mean, thank you everyone. It's like a celebration, isn't it, of all the wonderful involvement that we have at the Trust. Obviously, I do some of our external involvement, so around clinical trials and research. And we do, you know, engage with a wide range of the community, but we are looking for young people under 18 to kind of grow our community. Clinical trials are available for anyone, and so it makes sense that young people are involved in that too. So if you're a young person, or you know a young person who might be interested, then do get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get you involved. You don't have to have any experience of taking part in a clinical trial or know anything about research, just kind of an interest in it maybe, and kind of using your experience to help shape the future of CF research.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lucy. And another really key topic that we're going to be working on, there's going to be more involvement activity coming up. As we've said, you know, developing research and trials going ahead in a changing world for CF is going to be an interesting and difficult task. You know, it's exciting times, but really ensuring that say, you know, the outcome measures that are collected as part of clinical trials, which will then go on and inform treatment that is carried through into clinic, are the outcomes and the measures that are really important to people living with CF. So, for instance, FEV1 has always been used as or often used as a primary outcome for clinical trials. And with people having increases in lung function as they start modulator therapy, it may be harder to use that statistic to prove a significant change or improvement from a new treatment. So we're going to really be having to think about what measures are going to show the effect. So, and a lot of it is going to be around how people actually feel, how well they feel. I feel better on this treatment. How do we show that? How do we record that? So we're going to be really looking at having a project that is initiated and led by people living with CF to address those issues. Luke, you've got your hand up. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm going to be really quick, but I'm conscious of time. But just on, really, and I hope I speak for the other ambassadors that you know, I don't want people to go away from this thinking that you just have to be involved in the science side or the clinical trials side. I mean, lots of the other things I've done have had nothing to do with that at all. Like we touched upon earlier, you know, I've given 2 or 3 corporate presentations, which is really just, you know, me talking for 10 minutes about my life with CF. And, you know, that just puts in the minds of people who know nothing about CF, sort of, you know, almost everything they need to know in a nutshell. And, you know, it helps the fundraising campaign. And at the end of the day, you know, fundraising is the lifeblood of the trust. None of this would happen without the fundraising. And, you know, it's the fundraising that almost drives everything else. And like I touched on earlier, you know, it's all very well, all these pieces of the jigsaw sitting around, but it's the CF, you know, community's involvement that glues those pieces together. And whether you're interested in communications, marketing, you know, the science side, clinical trial side, I would just say, you know, whatever it is that you know, interests you in the trust work, frustrates you about the trust work, or you feel you can make a difference or contribute, please just sign up. Because, you know, if you don't want to do something, say you don't want to do it, say where your interests lie. And I'm sure Lorna and Lucy will find something for you to get involved in that will certainly float your boat, so to speak.
We absolutely will. Yeah. Yeah, we really try to tailor the involvement opportunities to what people have shown us their sort of like primary interest. So we try not to flood people with constant requests. Would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? Would you like to do something else? We try and make sure that they're targeted and tailored in a way, as you say, that, you know, because people do have different interests, you know, and we don't want to be appearing in people's email inboxes constantly. Anyway, I'm just really going to wrap up and say thank you so much to everybody tonight. I'm so grateful for the amount of time and effort that you've not only put into the involvement activities, but into the preparation of the event tonight as well. There's a few things I need to say to just close off. First of all, I'm really sorry if we haven't answered any of the questions in the chat. Everything will be followed up on. So if we haven't managed to answer it through the content of this evening, we will. As I say, this was the last of the scheduled CF Live events. So there's going to be a bit of a break, but watch this space for something coming in the future. There's an information and support morning on the 6th of March, which you can register for, and that's really aimed at people with CF and their families. So that's information for adults living with CF and parents, and say other family members on what the trust can provide and how we can support. There's also the UK CF conference on the 12th of May. Primarily, this is a scientific conference, and it talks about a lot of the research that's being funded by the trust and beyond. But say it's generally for CF professionals, CF scientists, CF clinicians, but people from the community are more than welcome. But we just want you to know that that's the scientific language that's kind of used in those presentations. A recording of tonight's live event will also be sent out. There'll be a link available to that. And I hope I've remembered everything. We've, as I say, involvement at all levels. There's also the opportunity to apply for a role of trustee here at the Trust. So we want to make sure that we have got people from the CF community involved at all levels. So don't hesitate to get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, and thanks for joining. Good night.